look.
The way that we make faces here at LAIKA is really unique. We are using a 3D printer to produce our faces. And this technique is something that we started on Coraline. We were the first studio to do so. And the idea behind it is you take about a 100-year-old technique of what's called replacement animation. And replacement animation is where you have a sculpture that was typically hand sculpted, and you take a photograph of that on the puppet, and then you remove it and you replace it with a slightly different sculpture. And when you knit all those images together, you get the sense of movement. So we took that idea of replacement animation and we fused it with 21st century 3D printing technology, which meant instead of hand sculpting these faces, we were modeling them in the computer, we were animating them in the computer, and then we were sending those faces to a 3D printer to be generated in 3 dimensions. So everything you see on this table has been 3D printed. We are making a name for ourselves in the movie making industry with this technique and also the 3D printing industry. About 4 months ago we were nominated and won a technical Oscar for pioneering this technique of 3D printing for stop motion animated films. And what we're really doing is we're taking these 3D printers and we're using them as a mass production tool. Instead of taking a design and then having it mass produced somewhere else, we're using these printers to do it. And the byproduct of that is we're really pushing the industry and we're pushing the machines to worlds that the company never dreamed of, but we also consume a tremendous amount of 3D printed resin, which the 3D printing companies like. So when we were working on Kubo, when we were working on Paranorman and Box Trolls, at the time we were in production, we were the #1 consumer of color 3D printed material in the world. We produce a lot of faces. So what that meant when it came time to do Kubo is we had a lot of clout to go to these 3D printing companies and say, hey, work with us. We want to really continue to push the limits of what our characters can do. We want to push the look. What do you guys have in the works that you have not released to the public? Is there anything that you guys are working on in your R&D facilities that we could utilize? And the answer was yes. There was a new color 3D printer that was printing in plastic that had not been released. And we started working with the company and were able to help them co-develop software. And what you see here is a character that's fully 3D printed out of plastic. This is the first time we'd ever done color plastic printing. And both Beetle and Monkey are also printed out of plastic. Now for us, we sort of get used to looking at how amazing these things are, but if I were to take this face to a 3D printing conference filled with 3D printing nerds from around the world, they would hone in on this particular object and say, how the hell are you guys able to do this? No one else has the capabilities of being able to generate a color plastic print with this amount of sophistication. But we do here at LAIKA because how far we push the 3D printing world. So basically on Kubo, he has, I think the entire production, we have produced 66,000 faces. The rapid prototyping department is about 65 people. We have about 35 of those people who are sitting at computer desks that are doing the modeling, the engineering, the paint, the rigging, and the animation. And then we have about 30 people who are processing all the 3D printed parts. The other thing we typically do is we typically print faces in 2. So probably the best example of that would be a monkey here, where we intentionally separate the face into what we call the eyebrow and the mouth. And the reason why we cut the face in 2 is because that seam line that you do see is digitally erased in post. But that means when an animator is needing to be on set and maybe the mouth is moving but the eyebrow is not moving, they leave the eyebrow and they replace the mouth. But the side effect of that is that we now have a tremendous amount of combinations. When you multiply the number of eyebrow poses by the number of mouth poses, you have a substantial amount of expressions in a range. Anyone care to guess how many possible facial expressions Kubo has? Coraline had 207,000. Norman and Eggs from Box Trolls had around 1.5 million possible facial expressions. This guy has 48 million possible facial expressions. He's got a bigger emotional range than I will ever have.